I'm going to talk about the things that I like about the show first, and then later I'll talk about the things that I didn't like so much. I think the production values are outstanding. The sound is excellent. It's very well mixed. The lighting is excellent. The sets are fantastic. The use of music, particularly the use of children's music, gives the games this extraordinarily creepy vibe. The acting is impeccable, and overall the show has a very original and very distinctive look. In 20 years' time, you would be able to show people images from this series and they would be able to tell you straight away that that's Squid Game. The second thing I like is there's not a lot of politics in the show. There is a trans character. I'll talk about that character in a separate video later. But other than that, there isn't any noticeable politics in the show. The cast are entirely Korean, or at least appear to be, and there's no contrived kick-ass female characters. The female characters are all believable feminine characters. It's notable that when the massacre takes place at the end of episode 6, it's only men involved in this. There's no women killing each other. It all takes place in the men's toilets. And when the rebellion takes place in episode 7 and they ask any contestants who know how to use a gun to come forward, it's only men, with the exception of the trans character. It's only men who take part in this rebellion. If this show was made in the US, there's no way that would be the case. I think they do a good job with the characters. They're all Korean. They all have the same tracksuits on and they all have Korean names. So for a Western audience, it might be difficult sometimes to discern the different characters. Yet that's not the case. I think it's possible to identify a dozen at least, maybe more characters. And we all know a little bit about each of them, a little bit about their personality and their background. So I think the show does a good job in that regard. Now let's talk about the things that I didn't like so much. We have the trans character. As I said, I'll talk more about her in a later video. I think the biggest problem with the show is the pace is too slow. It takes a long time to get going. We're midway through episode 3 before we have the first game, and the games are the best part of the show. It's what I imagine most people were looking forward to most. When we have the first game, it's green light, red light, a game that we've seen before. And I don't think this sequence was particularly thrilling. There wasn't a real sense of danger. The second game, which we see towards the end of episode 4, I also thought this wasn't great. I mean, there were some memorable scenes with the contestants cheering, but in terms of there being jeopardy, in terms of you feeling that important characters are going to die, I never got that sense during this game. The third game, the carousel that we saw towards the end of episode 5, this is when I think the show really gets into its stride for the first time and matches the heights of the first series. This was really fantastic with great use of children's music and a great set. There's a lot of emphasis put on the voting sequences, which I think is a mistake. We've 3 long voting sequences, and I never felt for a moment that the contestants were going to vote to leave the game. Similarly, when the rebellion happens in episode 7, I didn't get a real sense of jeopardy. I never felt this rebellion was going to succeed. I knew that this wasn't going to be the end of the show. I knew it was not going to be a success. The lack of jeopardy for the characters, I think, is a recurring theme. It's episode 6, the end of episode 6, when Thanos is killed. That's the first time that we see a really important character lose his life. And I think this is a mistake compared to other shows like, for example, Game of Thrones, which does a great job of keeping you on your toes. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not confident that any characters are going to survive. Similarly, when they were playing Russian roulette in episode 1, I never thought that the main character was going to lose that game. The final negative point, I would say, is the character 001, the contestant 001, that storyline. I have to admit, when I was watching the show, maybe I'm a bit slow on the uptake, I didn't realise that that guy was the same as the front man. It was only after I'd finished watching the show that I read that. And even now, I find it a little bit hard to understand how that worked, how how is that going to work if that character was killed during one of the games, for example? I didn't really understand that storyline. Maybe I should have seen it coming. In the first series, character 001 was also an insider. So overall, the positive qualities, excellent production values, not a lot of politics, and a lot of distinctive, memorable characters. Negative aspects, the trans character, the slow pace, lack of jeopardy for the characters, and a little bit of a confusing storyline regarding contestant 001. Overall, I would give this show 3 stars out of 5. It's a good show, it's definitely worth watching, but there are issues with it.